I just want to start off by saying we appreciate everything you've done for this company, but it's time for us to move in a new direction. You're fired. You're kidding.
This is Lisa Hutchinson, Director of Human Resources. I did get your email that you had sent to us last week, and I would like to speak with you about it. We take these things very seriously, and I want to get your side. Please give me a call back. This is my best number, 916. Thank you very much.
Significant other to kind of help you out, as your subject, and kind of get that distance.
Definitely.
Okay? Now, show me that you.
Salutations, Serene Eminence here. Welcome to the second installment of Close Encounters of the Unsuspectingly Predatory Kind, a series of failed attempts at siphoning feminine energy, which is centered upon thoroughly analyzing the surveillance unit lead trainer, aka the Tormentive Trickster, an entity of whom blatantly stated that he would thoroughly enjoy it if I were to submit to a posture of looking directly up at him as he simultaneously looked down to me. Subsequent to submitting a formal complaint, complete with additional documented incidences of harassment and solidified corroborative accounts against the Tormentive Trickster, he was consequently fired. Predatory conceptualization, the powerless handler. The initial episode of Close Encounters of the Unsuspectingly Predatory Kind, failed attempts at siphoning feminine energy, is centered upon deconstructing the true nature of the powerless handler, an entity that went from claiming that he would treat me as the queen that I am, to blatantly stating that he would love to penetrate my pretty face, whilst positioned in a posture of subservience. As I directed my gaze upwards towards his line of sight, the subject presented as vapid, apathetic, solely behaving engagingly for the sake of having his future desires met. The predominating presenting energy is that of powerlessness. The subject is inherently ineffective in his ability to operate as the executioner of his communicated desires. All installments, including the series preface, may be viewed via the Serene Eminence Escapades YouTube channel. The commencement. Communing with the Tormentive Trickster. I crossed paths with the Tormentive Trickster whilst being trained for the role of undercover surveillance investigator operating in association with a large-scale private investigations firm. With a scholastic background in the field of forensic psychology and a vocational concentration on investigative and profiling services, securing the position itself was quite an easeful endeavor. However, enduring unwarranted harassment whilst traversing through the training process was not something that I could volitionally tolerate. As disrespect, even if expressed on the subtlest of seemingly imperceptible levels, is unequivocally unendurable to me personally. The Tormentive Trickster operated as the unit lead trainer for the surveillance division. He mentioned that he had maintained the position as unit lead trainer for a little over a decade. Prior to systematically unveiling the impish essence of the Tormentive Trickster, let's garner insight into which circumstances serve to instigate the need to summon a surveillance investigator, as well as review raw footage of my stint as a covert investigator.
Oh no, one of your employees has gotten injured on the job. But there are some red flags regarding how the employee was injured, which raises some suspicion. During the employee's recovery process, you're having a difficult time getting him or her back to work. When you call, they're not at home, and they are missing their scheduled medical appointments. This is when you need an investigator who can get the answers you need. This is why we started MasterCheck. Many times, we need to know what individuals are doing without them knowing that they're being observed. Let us assist with discreetly documenting their true level of activity and then report this information back to you. We have manned and unmanned surveillance capabilities, as well as the ability to work undercover as an employee at your worksite to obtain information in loss prevention matters. During our investigation, we will keep you informed of our progress, and once the investigation is complete, we will provide you a final report with any video documentation we obtained. Obtaining this information allows you to choose the claim, get the employee released back to work, or pursue the employee for filing a false claim. MasterCheck's investigators are prior military, some of the most experienced and educated investigators in the area. We have years of experience working both small and large-scale cases. Our world-class investigators understand what it takes to get the results you need and are trained to establish an investigative game plan and think out of the box.
So if we say counter surveillance, it's me counteracting the fact that somebody's trying to do harm to me, or at least planning on it, or trying to get data out of me. It could be a low level, which is kind of laughable, where it's just a run-in and it's somebody not really giving you a hard time, but they are following you. They're kind of weird. They have odd behavior, all the way to a high level threat that's looking at kidnapping you, right? All of them will be counteracted by an unpredictable pattern. I think anybody that does surveillance would agree with me that if you are trying to stay out of somebody's line of sight, they can't keep up with you because they don't know what your next move is going to be. Now, in the culture today, or even in our lives and our routines, that can become absolutely exhausting. And let's be honest, most Americans today don't have the fortitude or the mental agility to be able to be that unpredictable in their daily routine. They just don't. We're lazy, we're complacent, we take the path of least resistance, we do what's easy. We all know we do it. Everybody watching this probably knows, like, yeah, I should have paid attention. When that car turned with me on the third time and it was odd, I still kept going to my house because I just wasn't paying attention to my instinct. I just wasn't listening to my gut. We've probably all done that. And I always say, I would rather you not need it and do it than need it and not take the right actions. So if we're talking about counter surveillance, that level of unpredictability is going to be the best course of action.
To understand how surveillance works and how to avoid accidentally giving insurance companies evidence that can be used against you. While surveillance can happen at any point in your case, oftentimes it's used as your claim approaches or after you reach maximum medical improvement, or MMI. This is where the insurance company typically looks to settle your claim, so they want to collect all the evidence they can to either reduce how much they pay you or deny your benefits for permanent disability altogether. Remember something, it costs the insurance company money every time they hire a private investigator, so not all cases will involve one. Some of those cases with the highest likelihood of being investigated include cases that are allegedly not work-related, large and expensive claims, cases involving long-term wage benefits, claims for permanent total disability or a high level of permanent disability, claims where there is little improvement after ongoing treatment, if you claim to have an injury but there is no objective evidence of one, and if you're suspected of fraud. Some of the signs of fraudulent cases that insurance companies look for are if you're a new employee, there are no witnesses in your case, you've made inconsistent statements, you've refused treatment, or you have a history of filing workers' compensation claims. Sometimes insurance companies assign investigators to random cases, so even if none of these apply, there's still a chance they're going to look into your activity. Should that happen, most investigators will monitor you for a period of several days, often during a time when the insurance company knows you will be in public, such as during a doctor's visit. But keep in mind that they can surveil you at any time during the day or night, not just 9 to 5. Insurance investigation is tailored to whatever issue triggers it. For instance, if you have a history of making claims, they're going to look for pre-existing conditions and older cases, rather than just following you around with a camera. If an injury occurs without any witnesses, an investigator might focus on interviewing other people who could provide insight about the event, instead of just stalking your social media. Some of their methods of investigation include doing background checks, comparing notes between doctors and other cases you might have, setting up cameras to record you, following you around in public, and interviewing people who know you. And as social media has become more prevalent, it has also become a popular way for investigators to collect evidence against you. They will not only look at your posts, but they'll also look at the posts of your family and friends in an attempt to catch you doing something you shouldn't be doing. So be mindful about what you post on social media and what other people post about you. Basically, a private investigator can do anything within the law to build evidence against you and your claim. What they can't do is anything that breaks the law, not only because it's illegal, but also because any evidence gathered illegally may not be admissible in court. So you don't need to worry about them doing things like recording you in your house, hacking your social media, or putting a tracking device on your car. In most cases, the investigator isn't trying to prove that you're not injured, but looking for proof that you're not as hurt as you say you are. If they can get evidence of you violating the medical restrictions that were ordered by your doctor, or performing activities that you have otherwise said you're not able to do, then they have a good chance of reducing or denying your benefits altogether. So make sure you're always honest and upfront with everybody involved in your case, because bending the truth will come back to bite you. If you have a workers' compensation claim, the most important thing you could do is to be honest with your doctors as well as the insurance company's doctors. It does not hurt you to be truthful about what you can and cannot do. Second, you should always assume that you're under surveillance. Make sure you follow your doctor's orders at all times and be mindful of your activities. Remember, appearances matter.
Predatory conceptualization. The tormentive trickster. In a dimensionally reflective fashion, those who are internally tormented oftentimes prove to be externally tormentive. Tormentive, an archaic term now largely obsolete, describing something that causes torment. Tricksters are agents of mischief that channel their intelligence into the conduit of deceit. They garner a great deal of satisfaction from exacting cunning schemes, and they extract energy from chaotic scenarios that they themselves haphazardly curate.
Tricksters are the breakers of rules, agents of mischief, masters of deceit, and boundary crossers. The best way to describe Trickster is to say simply that the boundary is where he will be found, sometimes drawing the line, sometimes crossing it, sometimes erasing or moving it, but always there, the god of the threshold in all its forms. They are the lords of in-between. While we endeavor to trace the trickster to his origin, he continues to play his tricks on us, always evasive, always crossing our conceptual boundaries of definition in which we try to confine him. Perhaps here is a first lesson to be learned from the trickster. Whatever we do, he's always one step ahead of us. The victims of people such as conmen and snake oil salesmen are those who are unconscious of trickster. They have been tricked by their own naivety, greed or self-deception. We have to be a little tricky to guard against being tricked.
The tormentive trickster, presented as fundamentally immature in his efforts to systematically curate scenarios of entrapment, all in an effort to feel a false sense of superiority. His torment is insidiously sublimated, craftily concealed underneath the guise of socially acceptable enactments, which manifested as derisive humor and self-righteous reprimand, wherein his suppressed aims were evidently revealed via his caustic, condescending tonality. He invests an insurmountable amount of energy and effort into reasserting dominance and control through the medium of his mischievous antics. Each exploit exists as a self-pleasuring stroke to his ego that allows for him to slyly get off on entrapping and tricking others. Each impish scheme is implemented in an effort to prove his very own false proof, ineffectively existing as a desperate attempt to experience a false sense of governance, as he utilizes tormentive tactics to cerebrally subjugate, infiltrate, and subsequently ensnare those of whom he desires to take agency over. He is ultimately channeling his negative impulses into the seemingly undetectable outlet of tormentive trickery. This entity is deeply discontented and is almost helplessly projecting his unreconciled discontent unto others. These unstable emanations inadvertently inflicts and unintentionally perpetuates harm, which if unchecked can lead to incidents characterized by visceral volatility, making it such that this enervating sequence of vibrational instability, unacknowledged malcontent, and internalized dissonance infiltrates his energetic makeup, thereby altering his spiritual equilibrium, which manifests as an innermost malignant torment that is precisely projected towards those that trigger the tender expanses of the torturous perpetrator's soul. The surveillance lead trainer overall has a combative, counterproductive, offensive, dehumanizing, discriminatory, and contradictory leadership style that is characterized by the consistent utilization of psychological harassment tactics such as subjugation, dismissiveness, shaming, belittling, entrapment, insulting, manipulating, gaslighting, withholding positive feedback, selectively withholding guidance and information, blatantly ignoring requests for further assistance, plus discriminatory treatment in a myriad of forms. He is incapable of offering proper guidance nor clarification when needed. He refuses to usher forth any semblance of a solution and is solely committed to perpetuating further confusion and contention, which sadly served to lower overall morale. Now that we have concisely conceptualized the character profile of the tormentive trickster, please allow for me to further set the tone via thoroughly contextualizing how training was coordinated so that all evidentiary corroborations may be truly comprehended. Training took place over the course of 2 weeks, The trainer, aka the Tormentive Trickster, was a balding Hispanic male who fell in the age range of around his late 30s to his early 40s. I trained alongside an extremely kind-hearted Hispanic male, of whom was in his early 20s. Along the course of the training process, I shadowed approximately 3 senior surveillance investigators, 2 of whom were Caucasian females and 1 of whom was an African American male. I became particularly close to one of the Caucasian females because her primary goal was in actuality to work with internal affairs in an effort to thoroughly expose and reprimand those of whom are corrupting spaces of power and authority. Amidst our time training together, she mentioned that she too had been harassed and brought to literal tears by the caustic antics of the tormentive Trickster. As soon as she told me that she had been harassed and had been brought to literal tears due to his torment, I became vehemently upset. Of course, I concealed my discontent as to not startle her, but I knew instinctively after hearing that this harassment was being spewed in a perpetual pattern, I knew he had to be exposed and taken down. It's the simple fact that he has been tormenting perpetually without reprimand, without acknowledgement, existing as a hidden corrupted figure in the firm's structure that needed to be exposed and extracted. Whilst engaged in training at headquarters, we were provided with a vehicle, a laptop, and all necessary recording equipment. And the first few days consisted of the trainer swiftly reviewing thousands upon thousands of PowerPoint slides with us at a swift and non-digestible pace. The only unsettling observation made up to this point was that the trainer refused to ever make eye contact with me. We were in the training room for 8-hour training sessions, and 99.9% of the time, he solely gazed towards the other trainee. And even when I asked questions, he would not look at me directly. On a few occasions, he mentioned that he would send supplementary study materials via email upon request. However, when I would request said materials, he would scoff or smirk and proceed to blatantly ignore my request. Although subtle, these incidences felt dismissive and insidiously intentional. At this point, I wasn't taking anything personally. I was simply noticing a subtly pervasive pattern emerging. When directions are adhered to, the surveillance unit lead trainer would find pleasure in altering his previously stated directions in real time as a means by which to justifiably belittle, insult, and shame a fellow trainee and I for being incompetent and incapable. The actual harassment did not ensue until we moved forward towards implementing all training knowledge in real time whilst operating in the surveillance van and beyond. The initial point of contention presented itself as we traversed throughout different stores in a myriad of areas, utilizing the trainer as the surrogate subject. Whilst following the trainer in the surveillance vehicle, he would drive at inordinately high speeds at random. He would make reckless decisions such as running red lights, switching lanes abruptly without a turning signal, and committing to make a left turn whilst in view, yet abruptly making a right turn whilst traversing behind obstructions to further curate a chaotic scenario riddled with confusion. The initial day in which we tailed the surrogate subject, we lost him when he made an abrupt turn behind an obstruction inside of a large, heavily populated parking lot, wherein he proceeded to verbally berate us regarding losing him and blatantly stated that we had to be more aggressive whilst tailing subjects and more willing to violate traffic laws to stay in pursuit of said subject, while in the same breath stating that the company will not offer any semblance of support if an investigator receives a ticket or is involved in a collision. In fact, the investigator can expect to be penalized if they violate any traffic laws, especially as it pertains to speeding. He then further reprimanded us, stating that it is essential to be aggressive because if you lose the subject, then you will run the risk of securing no surveillance video footage, which would therefore decrease the amount of viable minutes of footage secured and would negatively impact one's overall employability with the company. With this in mind, although I am a defensive driver, not an aggressive driver, I mirrored the trainer's unhinged driving behavior in an effort to remain in pursuit. And in a contradictory fashion, he stated that I was driving much too aggressively, and that it is better to lose the subject than to drive aggressively. When I iterated to him that staying in pursuit was in the forefront of my mind, and that it was essential to mimic his aggressive driving style so that I would not lose him, he became viscerally agitated and proceeded to raise his voice to me. I then told him that he curated a hostile and unsafe driving scenario which entrapped the trainees to follow suit. I stated that I refused to be reprimanded simply because he feels the need to contradict himself and alter previously stated guidance in real time simply for the sake of stroking his own ego. Further contextualizing the pattern of harassment. Moving forward in the saga of psychological harassment, whilst conducting surveillance inside of stores and inside of the van, he would employ similar forms of trickery and entrapment, wherein, whenever he noticed that we had a solid shot lined up, he would glance over at us and abruptly and very much intentionally make sharp turns to sabotage the shot. And he would do this for aisles and aisles on end during the entirety of the duration for which we were inside of the store. And once our minutes secured were reviewed, he would assure to berate us for not securing enough stable minutes of footage, even though he was the one who curated the scenarios to make this result a manifest reality. It was as if he were insidiously setting us up to be reprimanded so that he might feel a false sense of superiority at our expense. When setting up our vans, there was a particular way to black out the windows and organize the interior to prevent detection from onlookers. During this hour-long process, the trainer simply threw me the materials and offered me no guidance. He proceeded to assist the male investigator with fully setting up his van, and when he checked on my progress an hour later, he scoffed, offered nuanced negative critiques, and walked away. After entering and exiting the surveillance van, one of my shielding curtains had slightly slipped towards the very end of the training session, and he proceeded to yell at me, saying that this was an unacceptable offense and that it could potentially disqualify me from continuing on in the training process, thereby serving as a non-solution-oriented threat upon my very person and upon my very viability as a potential candidate for hire. The surveillance unit lead trainer insistently and unjustifiably reinforced negative narratives via telling a fellow trainee and I that we were destined to fail throughout the course of the 2-week training, wherein I recall a time where the trainee and I were parked separately in our respective vans, and the trainer put us through individual drills. He mentioned to me that he would work with the male trainee first and directed me to have my equipment ready within approximately 15 minutes. He arrived back to my van in under 30 seconds and asked why my equipment was not set up. And I told him it was because he said I had 15 minutes to have everything prepared for his arrival. He then said there is no excuse why I should not be ready, and that this shows that both myself and my fellow trainee shall surely fail and not become successful investigators. 95% of the surveillance unit lead trainer's offensive behavior was cloaked in humor and underhanded comments. His offensive behavior was primarily enacted in non-monitored spaces such as inside of the surveillance van or whilst he and I were corresponding alone, in person, or via Microsoft Teams. On occasion, when he was most particularly unhinged, he would verbally combat me whilst a trainee was present. He consistently engaged in deceitful behavior via curating lies and intentionally spewing misconstrued information regarding performance during training, and proceeded to become argumentative as well as hostile whenever I made attempts to clarify and address my solidified perspective. On one occasion, he proceeded to engage in an exceedingly hostile argument with me via a Microsoft Teams audio call and blamed me for existing as his sole point of contention. He raised his voice to me and proceeded to act in an intimidating manner after I attempted to address the presenting issue from my perspective. I attempted to screen record the call of the unit leader yelling at me. However, the Microsoft Teams app would not allow for me to do so. Subsequent to arguing via Microsoft Teams, I made an attempt to make amends via stating that I do not wish for our dynamic to be characterized by contention. I took the high road and apologized for my tone. And I sternly iterated that I would assure to be conscious of my tone in the future. However, if he proceeded to project a false narrative unto me and attempt to reprimand me unwarrantedly, then I would indeed speak up for myself and make necessary clarifications for personal rectification purposes. And on another occasion, he requested that I text him my favorite snacks and coffee. I responded by saying, "Wow, what a fun notion." He immediately replied, "What is fun about it? Who said that the snacks and coffee were for you?" He then proceeded to say, "I am only adhering to the company's request to do a service. I do not operate in service to you," as he laughed at me and proceeded to walk away. This unsavory incident encapsulated the very essence of tormentive entrapment, and the fact that he haughtily laughed after intentionally setting up this sardonic scenario is what officially catalyzed the necessity for me to expose him. As such, he himself set his very own destiny of being fired into motion. In regards to allegations of perceived sexual harassment, in an effort to provide an experiential glimpse into the derogatory training dynamic upheld by the unit lead trainer himself, kindly reference the following statement, which depicts a solidified point in time in which the unit lead trainer attempted to violate me and subversively sexually harass me. Whilst undergoing training inside of the Del Amo Fashion Square, located at approximately 3525 West Carson Street in Torrance, California, zip code 90503, the unit lead trainer and I were walking side by side. As we walked towards our respective vehicles, discussing wearing boots versus wearing tennis shoes, he was shocked that I was able to keep up with the training in boots due to the high heel attached to the boot, which prompted his curiosity regarding my height. The surveillance unit lead trainer verbally verified my height, which is approximately 4 feet and 11 inches. He subsequently approved of my short stature and then proceeded to blatantly state that he would thoroughly enjoy it if I were to submit to a posture of looking directly up at him, whilst he simultaneously looked directly down to me. I mentioned that moving forward, I would incorporate tennis shoes into my training wardrobe, and he stated that he would make an effort to stand next to me often to experience me looking up to him as he looked down to me. This statement felt derogatory and subversively sexually charged. Whilst still en route to our respective vehicles, he mentioned that a previous female trainee proceeded to take off her pants whilst in the passenger seat as he drove in the driver's seat. He mentioned that he saw her undergarments, yet I am unsure as to how he proceeded forth in this situation. Although her actions were out of his control, this scenario should have never transpired, because as a leader in an authoritative role, he should have informed the young lady that her actions were inappropriate and should have stopped her from fully undressing and pulling down her pants whilst in his presence. corroborative evidence. As I secured corroborative evidence that he had in fact tormented other investigators and trainees alike, the metaphorical noose that I was mentally weaving proceeded to tighten. Please be so kind as to keep in mind that current employees and trainers have confided in me regarding their negative experience with the trainer's inappropriate training style and the resultant emotional and psychological impact that it had on them. In fact, one employee relayed to me that the surveillance unit lead trainer intentionally brought her to literal tears during the training process. He displayed no remorse and continued to vehemently engage in abusive behavior, which is disheartening to say the least, and is unimaginably unacceptable. In regards to trainees and employees that have verbally corroborated my negative experience with the trainer, a trainee informed me that the trainer verbally berated him via a Microsoft Teams audio call for being on the other line with me. Prior to proceeding with the training session, the trainer blatantly stated that the trainee and I should operate as if we were a two-man crew, and to make an effort to remain in consistent communication via Microsoft Teams audio call. The trainee informed me that the trainer belittled him by saying the following: "Miss Eminence won't be here when you are on your own," making it such that he felt punished for simply following directions. The trainee also mentioned that he hated the trainer's manipulative training style, among a myriad of additional complaints. The trainee mentioned that he had amazingly refreshing experiences while shadowing current employees, yet felt drained and discouraged whilst operating under the supervision of the surveillance unit lead trainer. Also, a current employee mentioned that during training, the trainer employed abusive and manipulative training tactics that brought her to literal tears. Subsequent to bringing her to tears, he did not rectify his behavior. She had no choice but to endure the abuse as to preserve her potential job security. She mentioned that she had a desire to report the trainer for his demeaning training style. However, she ultimately did not move forward in doing so due to fear. At this pivotal point in my escapade with the tormentive Trickster, I had effectually garnered enough intel to enact a retributive exit plan. As such, on a day where he and I were scheduled to meet at an undisclosed location at approximately 6 a.m. in the morning, I arose at 3 a.m., arrived to the company headquarters at 4 a.m., entered the building utilizing the entry pin upon both the main entry and the investigative office entry point, and placed the car keys to the company vehicle atop the front office desk. The alarm began to sound because I had entered the building outside of working hours, and I did not know the code to silence the alarm. As such, I exited the building and left all company equipment inside of the locked company car. I then walked to a nearby Panera Bread and sat on the darkly lit patio until they opened at around 6 a.m. I spent most of my time refining a letter that I composed the night before, which thoroughly exposed the tormentive Trickster. I assured to prepare the email correspondence complete with all department heads, all unit leads, all investigators nationwide, and the owner CC'd, so that I might send the expose minutes after he realized that I was a no-show for our scheduled meeting. Because I wanted him to waste his time. I wanted him to wonder. I wanted him to think for a split second that he had a reason to reprimand me for not arriving on time, only to be met with condemnation from his superiors that had now been well informed of his true nature, and furthermore, his attempt to subversively sexually harass and torment me. Subsequent to comprehensively exposing him, I was contacted by the Human Resources Director, who desired to hear more about my negative experience with the tormentive Trickster. I denied her request to engage verbally and reiterated my experience in more thorough detail. She then proceeded to ask me once more if I would speak via phone, and I told her that I refused to exhaustively reiterate my experience. I had no interest in rectifying the situation, as I quite frankly had no desire to operate in accordance with the company that harbors unaccountable abusers. A week or so later, I was informed that he was formally reprimanded in the form of being officially fired by the company. I am now operating as a fraud investigator as a part of the Special Investigations Unit, which is a position that offers a higher salary and a more complex caseload that shall serve to further sharpen my investigative skill set.
Emotional precision is the highest form of power. You feel, but you don't fold. You care but you don't chase. You love but you don't beg. You offer everything from fullness, not hunger. And that's why they come back again and again, not because you gave them what they wanted, but because you made them question what they deserve. You made them uncomfortable, in a way that no one else had the nerve to. You didn't flatter, you didn't entertain, you revealed them to themselves, and now your name is synonymous with awakening, with tension, with standard, with transformation. They hear it, and remember a version of themselves they only knew around you, and that memory never leaves. You are not the past, you are the unfinished chapter, the conversation that ended mid-sentence, the potential they still replay in their mind when the room goes quiet, and they will do anything, say anything, to get one more line, but you no longer write with their ink. You write in silence, in absence, in standards that bend for no